My name is Faye Dunn, 28 years old, and I'm still reeling from the call that shattered my world. My sister banned me from our father's funeral. She said I didn't deserve to be there, that I'd failed him when he needed me most. Her words cut deep like a knife twisting in my chest. Just a week ago, I was holding Dad's hand in the hospital, his grip weak but warm, promising I'd be there to say goodbye. Now his absence fills every corner of my apartment. I clutch his old watch, the one he wore every day. It's ticking, a cruel reminder of time slipping away. I begged her to let me come to stand by his casket one last time, but she hung up cold and final. The funeral's tomorrow in Billings, Montana, and she's made it clear I'm not welcome. I sit here staring at his watch, my anger boiling. How could she take away my chance to honor Dad? I won't let her erase me from his farewell. There's a fire in me now, a need to fight for my right to honor Dad's memory no matter what it takes. I'm done pleading I'll show up and she'll have to face me. Nothing will stop me from saying goodbye to the man who raised me. If this story grips you, hit that subscribe button and join us for more raw, real family dramas that hit close to home. Your support keeps these stories alive. I couldn't sleep after my sister's call, her words echoing like a slap I couldn't shake off. She'd banned me from Dad's funeral, and the betrayal burned in my chest. I'm Faye Dunn, and I wasn't about to let Paula control my goodbye to the man who raised me. I grabbed my phone, hands trembling, and dialed her again, hoping she'd back down. The line rang twice before she picked up. "Faye, I told you you're not coming." Paula snapped, her voice sharp as glass. "You didn't care enough when Dad was alive, so don't pretend now." I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. "That's not true, Paula. I was there for him every day in that hospital." She laughed, cold and bitter. "Were you? Because I don't remember you lifting a finger when Mom died." The line went dead and I stood frozen, her accusation slicing through me. Mom's death 5 years ago shattered our family. Carol Dunn, my mother, collapsed in our kitchen during a heated argument with Paula. I was 23, just starting my job at the bank in Billings, Montana. Paula blamed me for not acting fast enough, for not calling the ambulance sooner. She said I let Mom die, that my hesitation cost us everything. I tried CPR, screamed for help, but it was too late. Paula never forgave me, and her resentment grew when I moved out to focus on my career. She stayed, took care of Dad, and made sure I knew she was the better daughter. Dad never took sides, but his silence hurt. He'd sit in his bookstore surrounded by novels, avoiding our fights. When he got sick last year, I visited every weekend, bringing his favorite mysteries, reading to him when he was too weak to hold a book. Paula called it too little, too late. Her words last night pushed me over the edge. I needed answers. I called the funeral home, my heart pounding. The receptionist hesitated before confirming the funeral was tomorrow at St. Patrick's Church, not next week, like Paula claimed. "It's all set," she said. "Ordered by Paula Adams." I nearly dropped the phone. Paula had lied deliberately, keeping me away. Why was this her final way to punish me? I remembered Dad's last words in the hospital, his voice faint but clear. "Faye, don't let anyone stop you from being there for me." He knew Paula's grudge ran deep, but I never thought she'd go this far. I paced my apartment, anger mixing with grief. Paula wasn't just denying me a goodbye, she was erasing my place in Dad's life. I thought of calling Tiffany, Paula's wife, but she'd always stayed out of our fights. Instead, I texted Caleb, Paula's 16-year-old son, my nephew. He'd always been close to me, sneaking over to play video games when Paula wasn't looking. "Caleb, is the funeral tomorrow?" I typed, my fingers shaking. His reply came fast. "Yeah, Aunt Faye. Mom said you weren't coming. Said you didn't want to." My blood boiled. Another lie. Paula was spinning a story to justify her cruelty, painting me as the daughter who didn't care. I sank onto the couch clutching Dad's watch, its steady tick grounding me. Paula's lies weren't just about the funeral. They were about control, about rewriting our family's story to make her the hero. I remembered the fights after Mom's death, how Paula would scream that I'd failed her, that I'd let Mom slip away. She'd call me selfish too, focused on my job to care about family. But I was there trying, just not the way she wanted. Dad's illness only widened the gap. Paula managed his care, made every decision, and shut me out when I offered to help. "You're never here, Faye," she'd say, dismissing me. Now she was taking the one moment I had left to honor him. I couldn't let her win. I opened my laptop searching for St. Patrick's Church. The funeral was at 2 p.m. tomorrow, open to the public, no guards mentioned. Paula's lie about the date was her way of keeping me away, but she couldn't block me from a public service. I thought of Dad, his quiet strength, how he'd read to me as a kid, his voice bringing stories to life. He deserved better than this. I deserved better. I called my best friend James Brooks, a lawyer who'd known Dad for years. "James, Paula's trying to keep me from Dad's funeral," I said, my voice shaking. "She lied about the date." He didn't hesitate. "Faye, you have every right to be there. I'll help you whatever it takes." James's words gave me a spark of hope. I wasn't alone in this. I thought of Caleb, how he'd sounded confused by his mom's lies. Maybe he'd help me too. I texted him again, "Caleb, I'm coming tomorrow. Don't tell your mom." His reply was a single word, "Okay." I closed my eyes, picturing Dad's bookstore, the shelves he loved, the life he built. Paula could try to shut me out, but I'd fight for my place in his memory. Tomorrow I'd walk into that church, look her in the eye, and say goodbye to Dad, no matter what she did to stop me. My phone buzzed with Caleb's reply, and his single word, "Okay," lit a spark in me. Faye Dunn was done letting Paula control my goodbye to Dad. Her lies about the funeral date were a slap in the face, but I needed hard proof to fight back. I grabbed my keys and drove to Dorothy Lowe's house, our neighbor who'd known Dad forever. "Dorothy." Our neighbor opened the door with a worried frown. "Faye, you look like you haven't slept," she said, ushering me inside. I didn't waste time. "Dorothy is Dad's funeral tomorrow at St. Patrick's." Her eyes widened and she nodded. "Yes, 2 p.m. I saw Paula at the church yesterday arranging everything. Didn't she tell you?" My stomach twisted. "She told me it's next week." I said, my voice tight. Dorothy shook her head, muttering about Paula's nerve. "She ordered roses, Faye. Big red roses. Your father hated those too showy. He always wanted daisies simple like the ones in his bookstore. Roses." The word hit me like a punch. Dad loved daisies, always kept a vase of them on his shop counter, saying they reminded him of Mom. Paula knew that. This wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate, another way to erase Dad's wishes and me along with them. I thanked Dorothy and drove straight to St. Patrick's, my hands gripping the wheel. The church office was quiet, the secretary glancing up as I stormed in. "I'm Faye Dunn, Michael Dunn's daughter," I said, barely keeping my voice steady. "Can you confirm the funeral details?" She checked her records. "Tomorrow 2 p.m., arranged by Paula Adams. Red roses, closed casket. Closed casket." Dad had told me he wanted an open one so people could see him one last time, not hide him away. My anger surged. Paula wasn't just keeping me out. She was rewriting Dad's final moment. Back in my car, I called Caleb, my nephew, needing to know more. "Caleb, did your mom say anything else about the funeral?" I asked. His voice was low, like he was hiding. "She's been weird, Aunt Faye. Told me you didn't want to come, that you were too busy with work. She's got everything planned, Rose's music, even picked the pastor herself." I clenched my jaw. Paula's lies were piling up, each one a jab at my heart. Caleb, Dad wanted daisies and an open casket. Did she mention that A? Pause, then no. She said, it's better this way, cleaner. Cleaner. The word made my blood boil. Dad wasn't some mess to tidy up. He was the man who read me bedtime stories, who taught me to ride a bike in the bookstore parking lot. Paula was stripping him of who he was. I called James Brooks my best friend and lawyer, my voice shaking with fury. James, Paula's not just lying about the date. She's changed everything roses instead of Daisy's closed casket. She's erasing Dad's wishes. James's tone was calm but firm. Faye, she has no right to keep you out or change what your father wanted. I'll meet you at the church tomorrow. We'll make sure you're there. His words steadied me, but the fire inside burned hotter. I thought of Tiffany, Paula's wife, who'd always stayed neutral in our fights. I dialed her number, hoping she'd talk sense into Paula. No answer. Typical. Tiffany never picked sides, but her silence felt like betrayal too. I drove home, my mind racing. Paula's control over the funeral wasn't just about me, it was about power, about proving she was the better daughter. I remembered the years after Mom's death, how Paula took charge of everything from Dad's doctor visits to his bookstore finances. She'd push me aside, saying I was too young, too irresponsible. At 23, I was building my career at the bank, trying to make Dad proud, but Paula painted me as selfish. When Dad got sick, I'd drive to Billings every weekend, reading to him, holding his hand. Paula would roll her eyes, saying I was just visiting for show. Now she was using his funeral to settle old scores. Caleb texted again, Mom's at the church, now finalizing stuff. I can't talk her out of it. I stared at the message, my resolve hardening. Paula could plan all she wanted, but I wasn't staying away. I pulled out Dad's old jacket from the closet, the one he wore at the bookstore, its faint smell of ink and leather bringing him back for a moment. I'd wear it tomorrow, a piece of him with me, when I walked into St. Patrick's. Paula could lie, she could scheme, but she couldn't stop me. I'd be there standing tall to honor Dad the way he deserved, Daisy's or not. James would have my back, and Caleb's honesty gave me strength. I'd face Paula head-on, ready to fight for my father's memory, no matter the cost. I woke up with my heart pounding, Dad's jacket slung over my chair like a promise. Today was the day I'd fight for my right to honor him. I, Faye Dunn, pulled on the jacket, its familiar weight steadying me, and met James Brooks outside my apartment in Billings, Montana. Ready? James asked, his lawyer's calm, a stark contrast to my churning nerves. I nodded, gripping the daisies I'd bought, Dad's favorite, not Paula's gaudy roses. We drove to St. Patrick's Church, the steeple looming under a gray sky. My stomach knotted as I spotted Paula's car in the lot, Tiffany's sedan beside it. Caleb's old pickup was there too, a small comfort. I wasn't alone, but the fight ahead felt like mine to face. We stepped out, the air crisp, and walked toward the church doors. Paula stood at the entrance, arms crossed, her eyes narrowing as she saw me. "What are you doing here, Faye?" she hissed, stepping forward to block my path. Her voice dripped with venom. "I told you you're not welcome." My blood surged, but I stood tall. "He's my father, Paula. I have every right to say goodbye." She scoffed, her face twisting. "You lost that right when you let Mom die. You don't get to play the grieving daughter now." Her words stung, dragging up that awful day when Mom collapsed, but I pushed the pain down. "That's not true, and you know it." I shot back, my voice steady despite the ache. Paula moved closer, her finger jabbing the air. "You were never there for him, Faye. I took care of Dad, his shop, his doctors, everything. You just showed up for the spotlight." I clenched the daisies, my knuckles white. I was there, Paula, every weekend, reading to him, holding his hand. "You don't get to erase that." The crowd around us, Dad's friends, neighbors, started to murmur, their eyes darting between us. Tiffany stepped forward, her face tense. "Paula, let's not do this here," she said softly, but Paula waved her off. No, Tiffany. She needs to leave. This is Dad's day, not hers. James stepped in, his voice firm. Paula Adams, I'm James Brooks Faye's lawyer. She has a legal right to attend her father's funeral. Step aside or we'll escalate this. Paula's eyes flashed, but she didn't budge. You're not his daughter, she spat at me. You're a failure who let Mom die and abandon Dad. My chest tightened, her words slicing deeper than I expected. I wanted to scream to tell her how I'd tried CPR on Mom, how I'd begged Dad to let me help, but James put a hand on my shoulder. Faye, stay focused. We're here for your father. He turned to Paula. Move or I'll call the police for obstructing a family member's rights. The threat hung in the air and Paula's face darkened. She stepped aside, muttering, You'll regret this. I walked past her, daisies in hand, my heart racing but unbroken. Inside St. Patrick's, the air was cool, the pews half filled with familiar faces. Caleb sat near the back, his eyes meeting mine with a quick nod. The closed casket stood at the altar, surrounded by Paula's red roses, a mockery of Dad's wishes. I felt a lump in my throat, but I kept moving James close behind. Pastor Thomas, a kind-eyed man, began the service, his voice soft as he spoke of Dad's love for books and community. I barely heard him, my eyes fixed on the casket. It was wrong, closed cold, not what Dad wanted. I remembered his bookstore, the way he'd smile when I'd read to him during his final days, his hand squeezing mine. Faye, he'd said, You're my spark. Now standing here, I felt that spark ignite. I walked to the casket, ignoring Paula's glare from the front row, and placed my daisies on top. I'm here, Dad, I whispered, my voice breaking. I'll always be here. Paula stood up, her chair scraping loudly. Get away from him, she snapped, striding toward me. You don't belong here. The room went silent, all eyes on us. I turned to face her, my hands trembling, but my resolve firm. He's my father too, Paula. You can't take that away. James stepped forward, his voice cutting through. Paula, sit down. This is a place of respect, not a battlefield. Tiffany grabbed Paula's arm, pulling her back, but her eyes burned into me, full of rage. I stayed by the casket, my fingers brushing the wood, tears welling up. I saw Dad's face in my mind, his laugh, his quiet strength, the way he'd hug me after a long day. Paula could scream all she wanted, but she couldn't erase those moments. I stepped back, my daisies, a small victory against her roses, and sat beside James. Pastor Thomas continued, but Paula's glare never left me. I didn't care. I was here for Dad, and no one, not even my sister, could stop me from honoring him. The air in St. Patrick's still clung to me as James and I drove to the notary's office in downtown Billings, Montana. I, Faye Dunn, felt raw from the fight with Paula, my sister's venomous words echoing in my head. But standing by Dad's casket, placing those daisies, had given me strength. Now we were headed to hear his will, and I braced myself for what might come next. James parked outside a brick building, its sign reading, Reed and Associates. My hands shook as we walked in, the weight of Dad's jacket grounding me. Paula was already there, sitting stiffly beside Tiffany, her wife. Caleb, my nephew, gave me a small nod from the corner. Two unfamiliar faces, a woman in her 50s and a younger one, sat quietly. I'd soon learn they were Susan, Dad's sister, and Emma Page, his niece. Edward Reed, the notary, greeted us with a somber nod. We're here to read Michael Dunn's last will and testament, he said, adjusting his glasses. The room felt heavy, every eye on the folder in his hands. Paula's gaze burned into me, but I kept my focus on Edward. He began, his voice steady. I, Michael Dunn, being of sound mind, declare this my final will executed 3 years ago. My heart raced as he read the legal jargon. Dad had always been practical, planning ahead, just like he'd organized his bookstore shelves. I hadn't expected much. He was a small business owner, not a tycoon, but I needed to know his final wishes. To my daughter, Faye Dunn, Edward read, I leave my bookstore at 112 Main Street Billings, including all inventory and assets, as well as my savings account at First Montana Bank, totaling approximately $200,000. My jaw dropped. $200,000. Dad lived simply, always in worn sweaters, never splurging. I glanced at Paula, her face a mask of shock, her hands clenched. To my sister, Susan Page. Edward continued, I leave my collection of first edition novels and $10,000. Susan, a quiet woman with graying hair, let out a soft sob. To my niece, Emma Page, I leave my set of antique bookends and $5,000 for her studies. Emma, a college-aged girl, looked stunned, her eyes wide. Edward paused, then read, To my daughter, Paula Adams, I leave no material possessions, as I know she would not accept them from me. Instead, I leave her a letter to be delivered privately after this reading. Paula snorted, her lips curling. Figures, she muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. I shot her a look, my anger flaring. Even now, she couldn't hide her bitterness. Edward ignored her, closing the folder. The remainder of my estate goes to Faye Dunn to use as she sees fit. I sat frozen, the weight of Dad's trust sinking in. His bookstore, his savings, all to me. Paula's face darkened, her eyes boring into mine like I'd stolen something from her. Edward handed Paula an envelope, his expression neutral. This is the letter from your father as requested. Paula snatched it, her fingers trembling as she tore it open. I watched her eyes scan the pages written in Dad's neat handwriting. Her face shifted, disbelief, then shock, then a pale, haunted look I'd never seen before. This can't be true, she whispered, her voice breaking. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. What does it say, Paula? I asked, but she didn't answer, her hand shaking as she clutched the letter. Tiffany reached for her, but Paula pulled away, her eyes fixed on the paper. The room was silent, the tension thick. Paula finally spoke, her voice low and unsteady. He says he was there when Mom died. My breath caught. Mom Carol Dunn died 5 years ago in our kitchen, collapsing during a fight with Paula. I'd always thought it was a heart attack, that I'd failed to save her. Paula had blamed me, said I didn't act fast enough. But Dad's letter told a different story. He writes that Mom was in a car accident. Paula said, her voice barely audible. He was driving her to the hospital after a fight. She was upset, clutching her chest. He pulled over, tried CPR, called for help, but it was too late. A heart attack triggered by the stress, but he tried everything. I felt the room spin. A car accident, Dad never told me. All these years I thought Mom died in the kitchen, that my hesitation cost her life. Paula's eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw guilt, not anger. He says he didn't tell us because he couldn't bear our pain. Paula continued, her voice cracking. He blamed himself, thought his fight with Mom pushed her over the edge. I gripped the armrest, tears stinging my eyes. Dad carried that guilt alone, shielding us from the truth. I remembered his quiet days after Mom's death, how he'd bury himself in his bookstore, avoiding our fights. Now it made sense. Why didn't he tell me? I whispered, my voice breaking. Paula shook her head, still staring at the letter. He says he wanted to protect you, Faye. He knew you blamed yourself, just like I did. Her words hit like a punch. All these years, Paula's hatred stemmed from that day, from thinking I'd let Mom die. But Dad was there trying to save her, and he never corrected us. I wanted to scream, to demand why he kept silent, but the truth settled heavy in my chest. Dad loved us too much to burden us with his pain. Paula folded the letter, her hands trembling. There's more, she said, her voice hollow. He helped me. Paid off my debts 2 years ago. $50,000 through a lawyer, no strings attached. My eyes widened. Paula's store had been struggling, but I never knew Dad bailed her out. She looked at me, her face a mix of shame and defiance. He knew I'd never take his money outright. He did it anyway. I felt a surge of pride for Dad mixed with anger at Paula. Even after her rejection, he'd helped her, and she still tried to erase me from his life. Edward cleared his throat. The savings total approximately $200,000, and the bookstore is valued at $150,000. $350,000 total. I couldn't process it. Dad, who lived so modestly, had built a legacy. Paula's jaw tightened, her eyes flicking to me. "You don't deserve this," she muttered, but her voice lacked its usual bite. The letter had shaken her, stripped away her armor. I didn't respond my mind on Dad's words, his sacrifice, his love. I'd honor him not just with his bookstore, but by living the truth he'd hidden for so long. Paula's hands shook as she clutched Dad's letter, her face pale as if the words had drained the life from her. I, Faye Dunn, sat across from her in the notary's office in Billings, Montana, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and pain. The room was silent. Edward Reed's folder closed, but Paula's reaction to Dad's words held everyone captive. Tiffany, her wife, reached out again, whispering, "Paula, talk to me," but Paula jerked away, her eyes locked on the letter. "Caleb." My nephew shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting between us. Susan, Dad's sister, and Emma, his niece, sat frozen, their faces unreadable. James Brooks, my lawyer and friend, stayed close, his calm presence grounding me. I wanted to know what else Dad had written, what truth had shattered Paula so completely. Paula's voice broke the silence, low and trembling. "He says he tried to save her, Faye. Mom." She looked up, her eyes wet but defiant. "He says he pulled her from the car, did CPR, called for help, but her heart gave out. He says it wasn't your fault." My breath caught a wave of relief and grief crashing over me. For 5 years, I'd carried the guilt of Mom's death, believing my hesitation in the kitchen cost her life. Paula had fed that guilt, blaming me for not acting fast enough. But Dad's letter rewrote everything. Carol Dunn, our mother, hadn't died in our kitchen during that fight with Paula. She'd been in a car accident, and Dad had done everything to save her. Why didn't he tell me? I asked, my voice cracking. Paula's lips trembled, but she didn't answer, her eyes dropping back to the letter. "He writes that he saw Mom's pain after our fight," she said almost to herself. She was upset, said she needed air. He drove her, but she clutched her chest and he pulled over. He tried to save her, Faye, but he couldn't. I closed my eyes, picturing Dad Michael Dunn frantic on the side of the road, trying to bring Mom back. All these years he'd carried that weight alone, shielding us from the truth to spare our pain. I wanted to hate him for keeping it from me, but all I felt was love and loss. Paula's voice hardened. "He's lying. This can't be true." She stood, crumpling the letter in her fist. "He's just covering for you, Faye, like always." My anger flared hot and sharp. "Covering for me, Paula. He was there. He tried to save Mom while you blamed me for something I didn't do." Tiffany stood, her voice soft but firm. "Paula, stop. You read it. He wrote every detail, the blue scarf Mom wore, the song on the radio. He couldn't make that up." Paula's face twisted, her defiance crumbling. "Then why didn't he tell me?" She shouted, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Why let me think it was her fault?" She pointed at me, her finger shaking. I stood, my voice steady despite the ache. "Because he loved you, Paula. He loved us both. He didn't want you to hate yourself for that fight with Mom." Paula's eyes widened, her breath hitching. The letter slipped from her hand, landing on the floor. Caleb picked it up, his face pale. Mom, Aunt Faye's right, he said quietly. Grandpa didn't want us to hurt more than we already did. Paula shook her head, backing toward the door. No, I can't. I won't believe this. She turned and walked out, Tiffany hurrying after her. The door slammed, leaving a heavy silence. I sank into my chair, my chest tight. Dad's truth had torn Paula apart, but it hadn't brought us closer. If anything, it widened the gap between us. I looked at the letter on the floor, its pages crumpled but full of Dad's love. He'd tried to save Mom just as he'd tried to save our family, even helping Paula with her debts in secret. I remembered the fights after Mom's death, how Paula's accusations had driven a wedge between us. I'd spent years trying to prove I wasn't the failure she claimed, working long hours at the bank, visiting Dad every weekend. But Paula never saw it, and now faced with the truth, she chose to run. James touched my arm. Faye, you okay? I shook my head, tears spilling over. He protected us, James. All this time he carried that pain alone. Susan, Dad's sister, spoke softly. Michael always put you girls first, even when it hurt him. Emma, her daughter, nodded, her eyes wet. I looked at Caleb, who clutched the letter like it was a lifeline. Aunt Faye. He said, his voice small. I didn't know. I thought Mom was right about you. I reached for his hand, squeezing it. It's okay, Caleb. You were honest with me. That's enough. Edward cleared his throat, breaking the moment. Faye, as the primary heir, you'll need to handle the bookstore and savings. I can assist with the paperwork. I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. Paula's rejection stung, but Dad's truth gave me clarity. He'd fought for Mom just as I'd fought to be at his funeral. I wouldn't let Paula's denial take that away. I'd honor Dad's legacy, his bookstore, his love, his sacrifice, even if it meant standing alone. 3 weeks after Dad's funeral, I stood in the doorway of his bookstore at 112 Main Street, Billings, Montana. The sign still read, Dunn's Books, but the shelves felt empty without him. Faye Dunn clutched his old jacket, the one I'd worn to the funeral, its leather smell bringing him back for a moment. Paula's rejection at the notary's office lingered, her refusal to face the truth about Mom's death, a wound that hadn't healed. She hadn't called, hadn't texted, and I hadn't reached out either. The gap between us was a canyon now, too wide to bridge. But Dad's letter, his legacy, gave me purpose. I wasn't just his daughter. I was his spark, and I'd honor him by turning his bookstore into something more. I met with James Brooks, my lawyer and friend, to finalize the paperwork. The bookstore and $200,000 were mine, a responsibility I hadn't expected. Faye, James said, flipping through documents, your father's shop could be anything you want. What's your plan? I didn't hesitate. A community library, I said. Dad loved sharing stories, helping people learn. I want his shop to keep doing that. James nodded, a smile breaking through his usual calm. He'd be proud of you. I hoped so. I pictured kids reading on the old oak benches, adults browsing free books, the community alive in a space Dad had built. I visited the bookstore daily, sorting through Dad's inventory, his neat notes in the margins of ledgers. Each page reminded me of him, his love for mysteries, his quiet laugh when I'd mispronounce an author's name. I found a photo tucked in a book, Dad and me, age 10, outside the shop, both grinning with ice cream cones. My chest ached, but the pain fueled me. Paula had tried to erase me from his life, but I was here keeping his dream alive. Caleb, my nephew, stopped by one afternoon, his backpack slung over one shoulder. Aunt Faye, this place looks good, he said, running a hand over a shelf. Grandpa would love it. I hugged him, grateful for his support. You're welcome here anytime, Caleb, I said, and he smiled, a flicker of the boy who'd played video games with me. I heard nothing from Paula, but Tiffany called once, her voice hesitant. Faye, Paula's struggling. That letter, it broke something in her. I wanted to feel sorry, but her silence after the funeral stung. Tiffany, she made her choice. I said, my voice firm, I'm moving forward for Dad. I hung up, my resolve hardening. I contacted a local contractor to renovate the bookstore, adding reading nooks and a children's corner. The savings Dad left covered the costs, and I donated his mysteries to the library, keeping his spirit in every book. Susan, Dad's sister, visited with Emma, her daughter. Michael would be thrilled, Faye Susan said, her eyes warm. Emma nodded, holding one of Dad's antique bookends. It's like he's still here, she said. I smiled, tears pricking my eyes. One night alone in the shop, I sat at Dad's old desk, his jacket draped over my shoulders. I thought about Mom Carol Dunn and the truth Dad hid to protect us. That car accident, his desperate attempt to save her, had shaped our family's pain. Paula's blame. My guilt, all built on a lie we didn't know. I wished I could talk to her, but her rejection at the notary's office told me she wasn't ready. Maybe she never would be. I looked at the photo of Dad and me, his smile bright. I'm doing this for you, Dad. I whispered, my voice steady. The library would open next month, a place for stories, for connection, for the community he loved. This journey taught me something I'll never forget. The truth can set you free, but it doesn't always heal. Dad's letter showed me who he was, a man who loved us enough to carry our pain alone. But it couldn't fix what Paula broke between us. Her refusal to face the truth left us divided, a family torn apart by silence and blame. I learned that hiding your feelings, bottling up pain, can destroy what matters most. Speak up, be honest, even when it hurts, because silence builds walls that may never come down. To anyone listening, don't let misunderstandings fester. Talk to your family, say what needs to be said before it's too late. Dad's love taught me to keep going, to build something good from loss. I hope my story inspires you to do the same. Thank you for hearing my story. If it touched you, please leave a comment and share your thoughts. Hit that subscribe button to join us for more real, raw stories about family and truth. Your support means the world.